Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Katie Zontak, and I'm the Cultural Arts Director at the JCC in Buffalo, New York. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight for the first program in our Jewish Poetry Reading Series. We're thrilled to be presenting this series again, and I want to start off by thanking Philip Turman and Baruch November for they'll be hosting our event tonight and for all the hard work that they've done in coordinating the series and finding our amazingly talented and diverse readers for each event that we have. I hope that you'll continue to join us for the rest of the readings in the series. We have one happening each month, I believe, through May. And at the end, I can give you the date for our next series. Before I turn it over, I just want to ask that everyone remain muted during the readings. We'll conclude the program with a Q&A, so at any point during the program, you can feel free to send questions or comments. If you're really loving something, please send it out to our readers. Also, keep an eye on the chat. I'll be adding in just a few minutes contact information for all of our readers for tonight so that you can go ahead and check out their sites and find more information about them, purchase books, read more of their works. And I think that that's all I have to do for tonight. Now I'm going to turn myself off and enjoy the readings with the rest of you. And I'll ask Philip and Baruch to take it from here. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming, everybody. We really appreciate it. We're so excited about this series. It started, I did a reading in Buffalo at the JCC and met Katie. And she's just wonderful, and the JCC was wonderful up there. And when the pandemic approached and happened, I thought maybe I would ask her about possibly a reading series through the JCC Buffalo. And she was so amenable and so excited about it that we had just zero problems setting it up. She did everything for us, and it was just so great and so easy, as she's doing now. And we had a wonderful series in 2021, I guess. Baruch, are you there somewhere?
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah, 2021. I asked Baruch, and I had a wonderful time thinking about it and getting excited about it and saying it would be wonderful and lovely to meet so many Jewish poets out there, because there's so many great Jewish poets, and it's a great way to meet them by asking them to read. We all want to read. I think many of us do, and want to hear each other read. And so we thought this would be a good forum. So I'm not sure we did it last year. I guess my memory is so faulty, but we're doing it again now, which is great. And I think we have a great series coming up with wonderful poets, and there's so many of them, and means we'll have to do it again next year and and the year after that. So thanks so much for coming and sharing this with us. I want to thank the poets in advance. Just the notion of Jewish poetry for me is just can't get any better than that. So at least for tonight, it'll be wonderful. So Baruch is going to introduce our first reader. We're going to have 3 readers, as you know, and then have a couple of questions and ask you guys if you have any questions. So if you have any questions, put them on the chat, and Katie will, or as she said, just to reiterate what she said. So we'd love to hear from you. And it's going to start a little short conversation going, perhaps. That would be wonderful. That's what Jews sometimes, well, often does. So go ahead, Baruch.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Jared Harel, a poet who has been said to have the ability to bring you back to the world of poetry if you ever dared to leave it. A poet said to fill his poems with the miracle of the domestic and daily. Impressively, Jared Harel's latest book, called Let Our Bodies Change the Subject, won the 2022 Raj Shoemaker Prairie Schooner Book Prize in Poetry. He is also the author of Go Because I Love You, a book of poems which, if you have not read, you simply must read tomorrow. Furthermore, you can tell how strong Jared's heart is because of his lifelong dedication to the Knicks. They keep letting him down. He keeps coming back to them. I know he won't let us down with his reading tonight. So here he is, Jared Harel.
Thank you, Baruch. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Katie. Thank you everybody for coming. I see some familiar faces. This is really great. A pleasure to be here. Pleasure to read with Joy and Jessica and get things started. So I'm gonna read 8 poems. I'll read 3 poems from my collection, Go Because I Love You, and then I'm gonna read new poems from my book, which is coming out in September. So a little bit of a preview. Everybody hear me okay? Great, okay. So I thought I'd start with kind of the opening poem from my book. It's kind of the title poem. So Go Because I Love You, as the title kind of indicates, is kind of about this intersection of love and loss and comings and goings. And so this first poem, I guess you need to know that my wife, she's a lawyer and she bills in these 9-minute increments and I'm not. And sometimes when she's feeling impatient or something like that, she has this phrase of hers, which is go so you can come back. And so I sort of use that as kind of the anchor phrase for the poem. It also makes a reference to a poem by James Wright, which you might catch if you know his work as well. So this poem is called Go So You Can Come Back. Go so you can come back, says my wife, meaning go but don't linger in frozen foods or forget where you parked or chat up the cashier. Go, certainly, because something needs getting while the baby takes a nap and the snow isn't snowing, and here are some coupons that happen to be expiring. So go before all the ripe produce turns soft and stringy and school lets out and a tallish boy hawking Skittles by the entrance wins you over and you throw him cash, your wallet, everything for the sake of his underfunded football team. Because though you never loved football, you love James Wright's poem about football and solitude and those suicidally beautiful galloping sons who go at it and go because I love you. Though I also love those Parmesan pop chips, and to love is to leave room for longing, but come back so that we might go out together later in a perpetual rotation of goings and comings, which requires nothing but patience and faith that when we go, we remember where is home. So that sort of starts off the collection. This next poem also features my kids. My kids show up a good amount in my books and my poems. It's not that I specifically want to put them in there. It's just I don't know how to kind of keep them out. And the first book is dedicated to my kids. And when my daughter saw this, she was super excited and she was like, I'm famous, I'm famous. And I was like, you don't quite understand the poetry landscape. You're not famous. But this is a poem. I think it's a poem about perspective, and it features my daughter. It's called New View. What luck, the sunset is something to look at. Angelic grand gesture, braggadocio of sky, jogger in pink socks down a tie-dye avenue. This high up, I show it to my daughter. I say the sun's going to bed and the colors are its pajamas. I say this crap and it becomes her childhood, the deep, impossible nodding of her heart. It's hopeless. I can't help but speak of her heart, crimson motor of meat and stardust, little metaphor, mighty tugboat. I say, you know, not everything I tell you is true. She says the sun waves goodbye, but the moon doesn't want to. And I'll read one more from the book before kind of moving on to newer work. So that was a poem that featured my daughter. This is the first poem I ever wrote about my son. Sometimes I need to explain what a bris is, but probably not in this crowd. A bris is a ceremonial circumcision 7 days after a Jewish boy is born. I wrote this when I was very sleep deprived, which is why I don't quite understand the title. The poem's title is Meditation in the Key of an Exhale. It also makes repeated references to a 1960s pop song, which you might catch. It's my party and I'll cry if I want to, says my son at his bris. Though it's my party and I carry the weight of 100 generations on the tip of my penis might be more apt, or it's my party, let us pray. The truth is, it isn't a party in my family until somebody cries or storms off in shame, barricading themselves in the opposite sex restroom, while my son, for what it's worth, hardly cried at all at the critical juncture, just sucked the wine-soaked rag between his gums, the way Abraham bit the branch of a thick-knuckled olive tree when he snipped himself, joining a club he was the sole member of, party of one. Is it still my party? Asks my son, slumped in the pocket of my elbow. He looks just like his sonogram ghost on the fridge, my lips, my wife's nose, and who knows whose chin. It's my poetry, and I promise not to cry when I read this to him. How the instant I saw him, I thought he was dead. A silence so wide, I stage dived into it. Was it the winter in his eyes, that umbilical noose so close to his neck? It's my party, and I predicted a smaller turnout, less guests. I expected to be alone. But here he is, plump as a blood plum, a part of it now, somehow my son. So when the ceremony is over and everyone is gone, I snap him into the car seat, tighten the straps, and holy hell, my heart is in my throat. So I'll read some new work now. This first poem actually came out of a prompt. The great Jewish poet and a friend of mine, Rosebud Ben-Oni, she had this project, and the prompt was to rethink this idea of discovery, rethink the idea of discovery. And I'd been walking around with these bizarre lines in my head, which are the first lines of this poem. And I figured I'd use those opening lines to try this prompt of rethinking the idea of discovery. The poem also has a very little bit of me singing, which I apologize for in advance. It's called All I've Ever Wanted. The almond milk has turned. Flecks of foul snow slink in slow liquid. Not the discovery I had angled for this morning, but as my dad likes to sing like some Jewish Mick Jagger, you can't always get what you want, which is just what I croon to my two children, driving them up the wall because of course, all they want is to get what they want. A fifth scoop of gelato, to play Minecraft till their eyeballs pixelate in their skulls. What humbling work to haul kids toward thoughtful, the kind in humankind like a foreign language on a stubborn tongue. Yet even as a toddler, my son would refuse a lollipop if his sister didn't get one, still plucks an extra sticker to gift her after school. And hell, my daughter can't ride an elevator without making a new friend or some lady's day by praising her earrings, her sweater, or purse. My point about discovery has escaped me by now, though I know the old chorus for thwarted desire. My cereal will be dry, coffee taken black. I will try against hope to be better than myself, which is all I've ever wanted and everything I need. Thank you. So one thing being a parent, I have two children, has done is it's kind of provided me with a new lens to see my own childhood and my own parents in an interesting way. And this next poem centers upon my father and the Jewish religious practice of morning prayers, which are called tefillin. And my dad is not religious. By most accounts, he's a secular Jew, but he's been putting on tefillin every day for the last 30 years. And so I'm this poem tries to reconcile those two things. It's called tefillin. You think you know your life till you forget your own father prays every morning, unzips a velvet pouch to wrap worn leather strips about his left arm and hand 7 times around like dressing a wound. You forget he prays in greased blue coveralls before the workday rush of mufflers and brake pads, and that he prays on Sundays in sweatpants and socks. He sets a black box a centimeter above his hairline, slaps a yarmulke upon his skull, prays, then stops. You think you know your life, but forget your father has done this since you were 6, since a thin, kindly rabbi spent a week in your home. How could you forget? It's true your life no longer confides in you. For too long you've been wary, screening its calls like a bookie you have lost all resources to repay. You forget your father prays the way he does paperwork, all alone and without enough light. He never makes a show of it, never once offered to teach you how. You think you know your life until the power sparks out one snowy December morning. So you climb your parents' stairs with your 2 children and laundry in tow, and there's a stranger by the curtains, his eyes squeezed shut, toes arrowed toward Jerusalem, bound in black lines. I'm going to read 3 more poems for you. Thank you so much for listening. So this next poem, the poem is called On Suffering, and it used to be much longer. And over time, the poem got shorter and shorter and shorter. So my grandparents on my mom's side were Holocaust survivors, and that sort of makes its way into the poem. But I kind of kept asking myself, what do I really know about suffering? What do I really know? And so the poem kind of got smaller and smaller, and it's with the backdrop of all that they went through. So here's the poem. On Suffering. To be clear, I'm no expert. I know only that suffering simmers in every heart, singes in plain sight like an electric stove. And though my grandfather told me over and over, I don't know how he made it through bone and mud in some shithole Polish village in 1941, or how he lost everything brutally and kept shuffling into light. So this next poem, I wrote this poem, the date's coming up, so I just thought I'd read it. I wrote this poem almost exactly 2 years ago on January 20th, 2021, which you may remember was the day of Biden's presidential inauguration. And the poem was published exactly a year ago on January 20th, 2022 for Poem a Day, which was kind of a great thrill for me to have it published exactly a year after I wrote it. And so January 20th, 2023 is coming up, so I thought I'd read it. It was one of those really gorgeous, snowy winter days in Queens, New York. And so the poem just sort of came out of that. January 20th, 2021. This morning, the snow lowered so slowly, I was able to lift my son, still in pajamas, and show him each delicate tendril of frost, the Arctic structure of a solitary flake. I was able to make coffee and think only of making coffee, a sensation so sudden and dangerous in its delight, I had to dilute it by burning the toast. This morning, I breathed deeply, clicked on the television, and watched for a moment a Boeing VC-25 fade over our Capitol and dwindle from sight. Nothing says revenge like dwindle from sight. Later, I'll hear the new president pledge to be better, try a bit harder. I will try to believe him the way a child believes a father in an overcoat by the door. But for now, all is quiet. My coffee tastes delicious, and nothing says revenge like the stillness of snow. And thank you so much for listening. I'm going to read one last poem. This is the title poem to my new collection. It's called "Let Our Bodies Change the Subject." And actually, I got to give a little shout out to Baruch. He saw a very early version of the manuscript, and he suggested that as the title. So thank you, Baruch, for the title suggestion. This poem is about a conversation I had with my wife right after a mass shooting. I don't remember, honestly, which mass shooting anymore, which says a lot about this country. But yeah, so the poem sort of begins with her talking and then kind of unspools from there. Let our bodies change the subject. In the kitchen, with the kids finally asleep and news of another shooting in the space between us, you confess you think death might feel like giving birth, the body insistent, having its way. You say you'd never been so at the mercy of yourself as you were on that bed, in that cloud-thin gown, and just the knowing it was coming, ruthless transformation. I have no good response to ruthless transformation, and so it hangs there above a bowl of tortilla chips and black bean salsa we've decided will be dinner. It lingers while a reporter frames chaos as developments, her shoulders rinsed in darkness and revolving red lights. I want to kiss you, build asylum inside you. Let our bodies change the subject, the channel, to cartoons. Before night pulls away down the flickering interstate, I want one ruined thing utterly redeemed, a death toll rescinded, a swastika removed, my uncle's melanoma caught early enough to cut, a beige Band-Aid halfway down his calf. It had looked, my aunt said, like little more than an ink spot. I didn't get nervous till it didn't wash out. Thank you so much.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Jared. Amazing. You should all just unmute and clap for a minute. Can we do that? Let's do that. We should be able to do that. Jared, I have to say, you had me at James Wright because we met, me and a couple of buddies, maybe resurrecting the James Wright Festival. So,
Oh, wow.
if that's the case, I'll let you know.
You'll let me know when and where. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful, fantastic, powerful reading. Wow. So our next reader is Jessica Jacobs, who's the author of Unalone, will be the author of Unalone when it comes out in 2024, which I've already seen some poems from it online, and can't wait for the book. Also, Take Me With You Wherever You're Going was one of the Library Journal's best poetry books of the year and winner of the Devil's Kitchen and Goldie Awards. Her debut collection, Pelvis with Distance, it's a biography and poems about George O'Keeffe, and won the New Mexico Book Award in Poetry and was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award. With her wife, Nicole Brown Jacobs, she co-authored Write It, 100 Poetry Prompts to Inspire. So quite a wonderful works here. She is currently the author, the chapbook editor of the Beloit Poetry Journal. Jessica's poems often reimagine and transform biblical passages and Jewish texts into her current here and now. And contemplating in one of her poems in her yard, the stars Abraham saw as future descendants, Jessica calls our attention to the space between stars and also matters the lines we draw to shape their absence, the lives we forge around what's missing. So let's listen to Jessica draw some of those lines and forge some of those lives. Jessica Jacobs.
Oh, thank you so much, Phil, and to you and Baruch for this just introduction to be a part of this beautiful series, and Katie for helping out. It's such an honor just to be here with all of you. And Jared, those poems were just really beautiful, and I love how you have humor kind of running throughout the whole thing. It made me realize I picked all unfunny poems, so I apologize in advance. So as Phil said, I'm going to be sharing poems from a collection called Unalone, which will be out next spring from Four-Way Books. And I came back to Judaism and to the Torah pretty late as an adult. I read the Torah for the first time, 5-6 years ago, and I was astonished by how this ancient text seemed to be speaking to everything that was happening in the world and everything that was happening in my own life as well. And I wanted to see where these stories, this wisdom could lead me, even if it was wisdom that maybe I didn't agree with and I needed to argue with a little bit on the page. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a great deal, I have this friend right now, Laron, a dear poet. And the last time I stayed with her, she lives in Santa Barbara. There was such a serious drought that when I went to take a shower, I had to put a bucket in the shower with me so I could use all the excess water to then go out and water her garden so her plants didn't die. That garden is now underwater, completely flooded. That is not normal. Right? We are in a climate crisis. And I don't know how you can read the story of the ark, of the flood, and not think about what we're going through right now, especially the fact that depending on what midrash you read, there was 120 years between when Noah was told of the coming of the flood and when the flood came. And he built an ark for the animals, which is great, and just for his family. And I think right now, a lot of wealthy nations, including ours, are building an ark just for ourselves. So one thing to know for this poem is the Hebrew word teva is normally translated as ark, but it can also mean word, collective nouns. When Noah was still just a man, not yet sailor and savior, God said, "Make yourself a word, for I have decided to silence all flesh." Scraping muscle from a hide, his wife crouched nearby, listening. Without argument or question, without a single signal of warning to neighbors or friends, her husband, that little wind-up toy, God's docile errand boy, complied. He built the word to spec, big enough to hold 2 of every creature, but too small for her mother, too small for her brother, no matter how she wept. From planks of gopher wood smeared with pitch, Noah built the word, and God shut them up in it. Water crushed down from the sky, fountained from the seas, dissolving living dust and breath to reefs of hushed mud. And Noah, a silent man in a silenced world, drifting in a wooden word. With an otter placid as a stole across his shoulders, instead of talking, he lived in his hands, picking nits, troughing water and food, always more water, tending to every walking, creeping, winged thing, to all beings but her, never lying beside her, never tasting the taste of sleep, his tongue withered to a husk. The dark hold was mobbed with chitter, roar, and screech without restraint, and from outside, the ceaseless babble of wood and rain. She was drowning in languages she couldn't speak, and he never offered her a word of comfort. When the rains finally ended, Noah bound a rope to the rafters. Before the raven, before the doves, he lowered himself from the word's one window. A splash, and he leashed the rope to his ankle, leaned back, and let his hands fall empty. Let the flood embrace him. Grime sloughed from him into the waves until the only animal he smelled was himself. Noah bobbed there, a beaming buoy, tethered to the word in which the future floated, where his wife, unseen, the new Eve, humanity's unnamed mother, looked out from the window and watched as he gave himself to the killing waters, looked past him, trying not to think of the death and rot that brothed him. Is a man good, she wondered, who can construct a word large enough for only a chosen few? And now, no matter what promise once rainbowed the sky, before the world is again silenced, the water and weather already rising, already tearing the roofs from the poorest among us, instead of floating unnoticing past those taken by the tides, can't we build a peaceful fleet, lashed by syntax and spring lines into a sentence of survival? Words that recognize, that welcome, not just some, but all. Another thing that really struck me in reading this text, I think because it just kept happening over and over again, was the fact that throughout Genesis, the greatest miracle was a woman couldn't have a baby, and then like this divine obstetric, thing happens, and her womb opens, and ta-da, and then she's a woman, right? Because she's a mother. And as someone who is married to another woman, and we have chosen not to have children, as there are so many women I know who would love to have children and aren't able to, the fact that that is what makes you a woman is something that did not sit well with me. And I wanted to think about it, and a good way for me to think about it was the form of the ghazal, which is an ancient Arabic form where you have couplets, and at the end of every couplet is the same word. And so there's that repetition, and you also get to say your own name at the end. And this poem gave me a little opportunity for that. You'll also find out that I'm very bad at following orders, so the word changes a little bit. The title is from Isaiah. Sing, O barren one, who did not bear a child. Her hand sharp in the small of Hagar's back, Sarai, that barren punster, pimped her handmaid to her husband, saying, as I am barren, please consort, Bonah in Hebrew, with her, by literally saying, I shall be built up, Ibaneh, through her. A barren woman can still be clever, though rabbis tea-leaved this to imply a childless woman is a ruined structure in need of rebuilding. Barren, however, was not a ruin forced on us, but a path my wife and I have chosen. A choice not so much against a child as for other things, our art, each other, a life barren only of all we'll never know. God said, I'll call you by a different name, and your destiny shall change. Sarai, barren, had no children, but Sarah did. Mom is a name I've cried times beyond counting, yet is a name I'll never be called. Less a name than a state of being, once born innate as DNA. Wife or writer, though, are titles non-familial, vocational, requiring daily upkeep, a renewal of, yes, I will still bear this and be stronger for it? Who can say? Perhaps we'll end up most defined by what we are not. Yet bared by the roof of our ruined structure, we count the countless stars, grow our shared life in place of bearing a new one. Because before Sarah, and even before Sarai, was the first of the three names she'd eventually bear. Iska, whose root might be Sakta, saw, which would make her sight a prophet's divinely inspired, or Sokin, a duller lot, meaning all gazed upon her beauty. Barren, Iska, precursor to the name Jessica, like all women, torn between being a seer and being the one seen. So prophet, tell me, is the only happy ending really a baby? I like received forms. They're kind of like puzzles you get to kind of put together. Okay, so this this is another of the not funny poems. Sorry, Jared, you really, we're just gonna go downhill. And then Joy, I know you're gonna take us back. Oh no, okay. All right, well, I'm teeing you up, Joy. So, another thing that I was very struck by, I think because it's something that I personally struggle with, is this idea of faith, this idea of just giving yourself to something, even if you don't see direct proof for it. And the story that I saw this in that I found most disturbing and kept coming back to was the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. And I just couldn't find a way to sit well with that tale. And I think that maybe is why it's there, right? It makes us look at different things that we might not face otherwise. And I just, yeah, I think my parents are here, they're fine, but there was a shooting next to their house yesterday. And I think, Jared, how you say a mass shooting and you don't even remember which one it was. And so how many people go and do these horrible things because they think they need to or they're supposed to without questioning. So this poem opens with a quote by the philosopher Eric Hoffer. Absolute faith corrupts as absolutely as absolute power. Why there is no Hebrew word for obey. What came later was the real trial, because God knew Isaac would not die while Abraham climbed the mountain believing he would. With conviction tempered in the fires of his faith, he walked up through the shaded valley, his son resolute ahead on the trail. Behind them, Sarah, Isaac's mother, Abraham's wife, a small darkness in the distance, growing forever smaller. He bound his beloved son, pulled back his legs, wrenched back his arms, knotted his ankles to his wrists, and laid him on that altar like a child falling through the sky. He held the knife, knowing from every animal he'd ever sacrificed how his son would jerk and shudder when the blade opened his throat, the familiar smoke of offered flesh. What came later, even with Isaac alive in the fields, inside Abraham was the knowledge of what he'd been willing to do. When they passed in the tent, Isaac rubbed a remembered ache in his shoulders and never again held his father's eye. Sarah, smelling the imagined ashes on her husband's fingers, the blood in the crease of his throat, turned from him in the night. And on every path Abraham walked from that day forward, his son as he had been, a small back, barely the span of his hand, slung with the kindling meant for his burning. Seconds from the slaughter of the one meant to carry his line, of the son he had wanted all his life. Who's to say the voice in his head was God? Judaism is not a faith, but a tradition. Doubt the crux of its conscience. Yet what came later on a Sabbath morning, centuries on, was a congregation in Pittsburgh reading this story of Isaac's binding, of Abraham's terrible bind, when a man burning with unquestioning belief entered with a gun and with no better angel to stay his hand, opened fire, believing the death of Jews would keep our country safe, believing this massacre, elderly congregants bleeding out on the floor, was God's work. Who would call such actions holy? And how many more times will each of us come down from the mountain, conviction knocking like a knife in our belt loop, stained with all we would have done? My daily gods are minor ones of pride, of lust, impatience, and complacency. Yet how many have I harmed on the way to what I thought was right, or with hindsight, on the way to what I wanted? What if we turn from certainty and arm ourselves instead with questions? Obey, obey, obey is everywhere in translation. The real word is shema, listen. Thank you. And I am going to end maybe kind of in the same place, Jared, that you did. I think that now that I am entering or have entered middle age, I think that I am entering into a new phase of my relationship with my parents. When they were there to care for me as I grew up, I was fortunate that way. And now that role is shifting and reversing in some ways. And I was trying to write about the time when Jacob came to be with Joseph in Egypt. And there's a quote from Rabbi David Kimhi: just as Joseph was in the lap of Jacob 17 years, Jacob was in the lap of Joseph 17 years. And I love that mirroring, and I couldn't quite find my way in. And then I took this workshop with an amazing poet that you're about to hear from, Joy Ladin. And she shared the prayer Kianu Amecha as a writing prompt. And I don't know if they are still here, but with a translation, yes, by Elliot Batsedek, that had this beautiful mirroring in it. And that for me was the receive form I needed. So thank you. Reciprocity. Oh, and I should say that the first line of Kianu Amecha could be translated, we are your people and you are our God. And so that's kind of the form, that we are this, you are that. Reciprocity. For I was mud and you were the face pressed to mine, making me in your image. When I was a furnacing fever, you were a dousing river. I word hunger and you the book by heart. I new blooming, you pages of my pressed petals. And when I was ambition, you were the open hand, guiding, supporting, letting me go. Now, when you have faltered, I am the hand that guides, supports, promises not to let go. Your memories, blossoms browning on the vine, your tongue hungry for right words. I am the book of your life, offering you back to you. You furnace with fear. I am the river to calm your feet in. And when one day you finally rest, I will be the face that keeps your face in the world. Thank you.
Wow, thanks so much, Jessica. Boy, amazing. Yeah. Stay on there, Jessica. If you have a few minutes, can you tell us a little bit about it, Sarah? Am I
Oh,
pronouncing
yeah.
that correct?
Yes, I will. I'll put my other hat on.
Yeah, put your head on.
Okay,
Thanks.
absolutely. Sorry, poetry hat taken off. So Yetzirah is, if you're familiar with Kaveh Khanum, which is this astonishing group for African American poets, or Kundiman for Asian American poets. I was really shocked when I started writing these poems that nothing like that existed for Jewish poets. I wanted to be in community, a community like this one on the screen, which is so beautiful, while we also have other people welcomed into it. I wanted to learn from people. And I just had found that Judaism had so changed me as a person and as a poet that I wanted to see what would happen if there was a group in which we could come together and share that part of ourselves, right? We could have that overlap of us as Jews and as poets. And so Yetzirah is an organization that offers that. We have an online reading series. Our next reading is this Sunday. We have a reading each month, and we have lots of time for conversation afterward. It's open to everyone. And that is building toward our first summer conference, which will be in Asheville, North Carolina. And we have incredible faculty, Roger Kamenetz, Ilya Kaminsky, and Alicia Ostreicher, which is, it's just going to be a dream. And it's just, and then there's just a ton of resources. We have a list of Jewish literary festivals. We also have a database of Jewish poets. So if you have an opportunity, you can look around and maybe find a new favorite poet. And if you're not there and you are a Jewish poet, you can absolutely add yourself. Jared and Joy are both in the database. So there's a lot going on. We have a lot more in the works, but applications for the conference open next month. So feel free to be in touch if you have any questions. Thank you, Phil, for giving me a moment to chat about it.
You. Wow, for all of that.
Yeah.
What a wonderful thing. Getting all these poets in one place.
Well, I actually went to one of your readings before this was in the world, and it definitely was inspiring. So thank you.
But boy, you've just fantastic. So yeah, thanks so much. Jessica teed off Joy. So I'm gonna Joy Ladin, thanks so much for being here. Just done amazing, incredible work. 10 books of poetry, including her recent 2022 Shekinah Speaks National Book Award winner, The Book of Anna, the Lambda Literary Award finalist for Transmigration and Impersonation, as well as a memoir and a book of trans theology. So she's the author of all these wonderful books of poetry and memoir. The memoir Through a Door of Life, A Jewish Journey Between Genders, which is a critical study. Again, Soldiering the Abyss, Emily Dickinson in Modern American Poetry. And if that's not enough, creative nonfiction, The Soul of a Stranger, Reading God and Torah from a Transgender Perspective. She's a professor at Yeshiva University, where she holds the David and Ruth Gottsman Chair in English. And maybe as important, she's a nationally recognized speaker on gender and Jewish identity, and has spoken all around the country, maybe even the world by now, the universe, perhaps. I love her poetry, as Jessica's and Aaron said. In a new collection, Shekinah Speaks, many of the poems speak the oracle voice of God, or maybe the Shekinah, I guess. Most to admire about Joy's presence is her bravery and her wisdom, her vision in pushing the boundaries into new ways of enacting Jewish and human sensibilities. In her poem, Ready, she has the chutzpah to declare, and I'm going to quote from that poem, so maybe it's not on your list, I don't know. Here I am, the one who declares you have nothing to fear and nothing to prove. Are you ready to be strong? Time to remake the world. Let's hear Joy remake the world. Please welcome Joy Ladin.
Thank you, Philip. Set the bar high there right at the end. But Jared and Jessica had already done that. Thank you for your incredible poems. It's really an honor to read with you. And I just want to tell Faye that anybody who finds that Jessica Jacobs is in their class is a truly blessed teacher. That is as good as it gets. So I wanted to do this reading for my mother, Lola Kipnis Ladin, who died last summer. She grew up in Montreal, but after spending a couple of years in Buffalo, she spent most of her life in Rochester. And she died after years of increasing dementia. So all of these poems are going to relate to mothers. Thinking about my mother does not make me quip. So Jared, you're holding down the humor for all three of us tonight. Okay, so I'm going to start with an excerpt from the Book of Anna. Anna is a fictional Jewish Holocaust survivor. She spent her adolescence in a concentration camp, and she's living in 1950s Prague, trying to kind of write her way to, well, either to suicide or figuring out a way to live. And one of the things that keeps coming up through the book is she's enraged with her mother. She's got some kind of issue with her mother. You don't know what it is until the end. Her mother was a concert pianist, hid her as things were getting bad with a non-Jewish family, and died in a different concentration camp after her fingers were broken. So this is the part of the book where Anna is telling her mother's story, and she addresses her mother throughout. Your hands grew. You grew too into what they call a Jewess, dark and small, vivaciously elegant, a type much in demand among the self-proclaimed, newly shaved, enlightened. David was their cafe king. You were 1 in 20, wealthy, proud, queen of the conservatoire he'd scandalized by playing Joplin rags, 2 at a time, 1 with either hand. He could do anything with his hands, you said, and did. You were drunk. I was 7. You talked to me heart to heart, woman to bitter woman. Asked me if I missed him. We're better off, you said. He had no music in him. When I was 10, I swooned over the publicity still you saved in a trunk in the attic. Nose Jewish, but not too. A man who could do anything with his hands. They lay folded in his lap just outside the frame, like gods when earth was finished. You anoint me with sweet-smelling oil after every bath. I'm 10, scented like a woman, cosseted like an infant, raised high like a budding unicorn horn. My Anna, you'd say, proud Frau Asher, with your music and your daughter. She's been on the radio, you know. They say no man can please her. Certainly not the mill owner who lumbered his way up from peasant parents and stank, you said, of splinters. Not even the artist who rendered your hands as pale, unheimlich creatures, smears of white on an unmown mound in the forest he obsessively painted. For you, only a David would do. Messianic fevers, New Jerusalems. I toss that up to you, hoping to be cruel. Bath time's over. You oil my still damp flesh. No scars yet, Mama. No sex. Nothing to justify my savage loneliness. an unmarked body like an unmarked world, glowing a little in the dusk beneath the gaze of its creator. You laugh and stretch what critics called your regal figure. A queen, my queen, end and seal of creation. Yesterday was perfect. Mozart weather, you used to call it. The kind of day when the righteous flourish visibly, when girls go shopping with their mothers or loll on lawns, scenting the air like flowers, when pain becomes beauty, as your beloved Chopin promises. How strange, Mama, how hard it is to forgive your devotion to Chopin, even after the concerts were canceled, and no one gave a damn exactly how Frau Asher attacked the blah in blah blah flat. You locked yourself in with him. I listened through the keyhole, Mama. Saw you only at supper. The workers of iniquity flourished. We became poor, poorer. Someday I'd understand, you said. Today I'd laugh. That night, all I had to offer, other than your dinner, was the news that my last good dress was spoiled when, at school, I bled. The ox-drawn cart creaked to a halt near the forest that bordered our yard. We'd been at each other for hours. Rain, a steady drizzle. You wouldn't admit you didn't want me with you. Just your piano, Chopin, and you. No one to scream and throw your music stool and try to tear them off you. Get in, Anna, under the straw. Yes. Your fingers bruised my shoulders, smelled of cinnamon. Of course I'll come to get you. For God's sake, get in. Something about love, obedience, money changing hands. God was there, a cut grass odor, damp and omnipresent. The ox cart creaked beneath my cheek. Delivery time, late Friday afternoon. At any moment, the queen was due, as always, passing through. So, yes, I was more interested in Anna's argument with God, but she was really interested in her argument with her mother, and she won. So, I want to read a couple of poems from Shekhinah Speaks, which all of the poems are intended to be space, to turn poetry over to the Shekhinah, the female immanent aspect of God in Jewish mystical tradition. And all of them use words that came from other texts. One text from late Isaiah and one from Cosmopolitan magazine that fit with it. Because time is short, I won't give myself the pleasure of reading the titles involved, but trust me, they're good juxtapositions. This one is called, so I've picked the ones that have mother imagery. This one is called Stillborn. You're still being born, still trying to understand what you are and where I am, inside or outside, attached or disattached, still digging, still scraping, still filling with time, still buried, still growing, still waiting to be delivered. I know. I'm the neighbor who's always watching, the teacher who's sometimes kind, the mother who sees how hungry you are, the doctor who makes you sick. Sometimes I stagger you with terror, but I also cover your body with flowers, pinks and sweetheart roses. When they wilt, I remain before you're born, and there in the casket, you are still my favorite color, a cloud I continue to ride even when you're no longer moving, a love into which I keep falling even when you're no one, nothing, stillborn or miscarried. I still surround you like a uterus, and you are still my baby. Um, because these poems are, the Shekhinah, but the goal is the Shekhinah speaking. When you hear me speaking, that's bad, and usually the worst parts of the poems. But there was one poem that came directly out of my experience with my mother that I want to read now. Um, it's called Forgetting, and here I will read the epigraphs from Isaiah. Can a woman forget her baby or disown the child of her womb? Though she might forget, I could never forget you. And the Cosmo article is called What It's Like to Lose Your Entire Memory. And the poem started when my mother was in the emergency room on Kol Nidre night. We spent all night in the emergency room. Someone died next door. I heard it, and my mother had a high fever, and she forgot every 90 seconds or so where she was and why she was there. And so I had to tell her the whole story, and then she would pause for 90 seconds and ask me where she was and why she was there. And in the early morning, I realized, oh, this is the way God sees us. God always has to tell us the same stuff over and over and over again, and we can't remember it for more than a minute at a time. This is called forgetting. You don't remember anything. How I formed you in your mother's womb, nursed you, bathed you, taught you to talk, led you to springs of water. I sang your name before you were born. I'm singing your name now. You're clueless as an infant. When I tell you to shout for joy, you hear a bicycle or a cat. Sometimes memories of me come back, like children you forgot you had. A garden, a bride, an image of your mother, a best friend, a brother, a cop, or snow or afternoon. Whose are these, you wonder? Then you forget and feel forgotten, like an infant who falls asleep at the breast and wakes up hungry again. Your mother might forget your child, but I never forget. Your name is engraved on the palms of my hand. I shower you with examples of my love, bees and birds, librarians, life skills, emotions, sunlight, compassion. Nothing connects. Every dawn, every generation, I have to teach you again. This is water. This is darkness. This is a body matching your description. That's a crush. This is an allergic reaction. This is your anger. This is mine. This is me reminding you to eat. Turn off the stove. Take your medication. This is the realization that I am yours and you are mine. This is you forgetting. Oh, yeah. All of you are now thinking, thank God for Jared, right? Um, we did laugh once, um, and we will laugh again, but not quite yet. I want to finish with, I know it's been a lot of poetry, but I just wanted to read one more poem. And this is from a book that's forthcoming called Family. It's forthcoming from Persia. I don't actually know how that's pronounced, so I'm just taking that shot. After my mother died, I knew as an American poet I was supposed to write about it. Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon says, when your partner dies, you're supposed to do something about it. And in poetry workshops, they say, when your mother dies, you're supposed to write something about it. And I really didn't know how to do that. I didn't even want to do it, but I did. I had to. So this is one of those poems. It's called My Mother's Body. My mother's body is busy shutting down. Eyelids flutter, heartbeat slows. I can almost feel her dark red chambers emptying and filling. My mother smiles in her sleep. Maybe a spasm, maybe a dream. Maybe she knows I'm there. Hears my voice, is dreaming we're together. Her mouth is a gaping Gothic arch. gateway to a house struggling to stay haunted. Some of her is still in there. My sister says the funeral can be whatever I want. I find it hard to want a funeral for my mother. A box and a body and a hole in the ground, and 2 tossed shovelfuls of dirt, my sister's and mine. It's my job to imagine the funeral that is striding closer, the hole that is already opened in the days ahead, to decide what to say above the body, to think the body about my mother. It's my job to remember all the jobs that I'm not doing. My mother is far away and shrinking, like a sliver of sky through closing shades. Her chin sinks to her chest. I repeat words my mother won't remember and can only occasionally understand. My sister says her status is changing fast. Suddenly, clearly, my mother asks what's happening. My sister explains, as she has so often, that she, our mother, is dying. It's my job to explain that too. Another job I'm not doing. My mother's eyelids flutter open. The light in her eyes comes on. She smiles her famous smile of delight, of inside jokes, of triumph, and turns her head from my sister to me. Well, that was an experience, she says. Thank you.
Like, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Wow. Remember Emily Dickinson saying, you know, she knows what good poetry is when the top of her head sort of blows off, something like that. I think that's happened tonight. I know that's happened tonight for me, which leaves you kind of speechless. So
I'm mesmerized.
Katie, I wonder if Katie's still here. Katie.
Yes.
I think she is. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. I was just, yeah, like everyone, just sitting here enjoying everything. And I just loved how diverse and different all 3 of you were with your poems. And
Wow.
great job piecing these 3 poets together. I think this was a wonderful, beautiful evening. So
Yeah, Baruch, I think we did a good job there, don't you? Picking some good poets.
Yeah, I mean, the job did itself, I think.
I think it did. I think it did. Wow. Thank you so much. Poets are just amazing. And you'll see what they said about you in the chats. What we all said about you as you were reading. That is an advantage of the chat. Hard to do that in a live thing, but people can just kind of kibitz with each other, and that's what we did. And it was just so beautiful, so wonderful, and with so many different directions and different ways of looking at similar things, and just all coming from the same text. Just beautiful. Just and that's what we hope for. So I think Baruch, are we asking a couple questions first? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I guess so. Did you want to start, or should I start?
Well, Katie, do we have any questions from the
I've been looking, I didn't see any questions. It seems like it was mostly comments coming through the chat, and I didn't get anything ahead of time.
Maybe now is the time. If you have a question, send it over to Katie, and when we have some time for a couple, would be great if if we can. Baruch, why don't you want to start? And I've been talking.
Okay, my question, since we started with Jared, and that was kind of an upper, and and my question is not such an upper, to be honest with you, but I think it's an important question, so I'm going to ask it anyway. In November of 2022, Jews were the target of 60% of the hate crimes in New York City. As a Jewish poet and a voice people listen to in academia, what, if anything, do you feel inspired to do by such information.
Jewish poets, you can unmic yourselves. And
Joy, you were unmuted. Did you want to join in?
unmute yourself. I guess that's the word. Yeah, Joy and Jessica and Jared, you're on the line here. I have a question.
Keep writing, I guess. You know, for me, is, I mean, I guess in the face of hatred, you know, specifically for about who you are, my initial impulse is to keep being myself, keep being, you know, is to kind of continue that. And, you know, for me, I have grandparents who are Holocaust survivors. So that sort of hatred is very present in my past, as it is for so many. And I have, you know, two Jewish children. So I very much think about their lives, you know, and I find that, you know, as if the world weren't scary enough, having kids makes the world infinitely more scary. And so, yeah, I mean, I think about it. I don't know if I dwell on it, but I do feel like writing from a Jewish perspective gains added importance for me.
Go ahead, Joy.
No, please.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think I agree with you, Jared. I think being visible is really important, and not hiding, not obscuring, you know, Judaism in my poems. But I think as much as there is external anti-Semitism, I think that just with Yetzirah, I hear so much about the prejudice internal within different Jewish culture. And so to me, something that I can do, you know, hopefully as an individual, but also with this organization, is to say, you get to define what it means to you to be a Jewish person, to be a Jewish poet, and to speak your truth, however that is for you. And to me, that's so crucial, because I think fear makes us want to hide, and maybe even makes you want to not be a part of this tradition anymore. So I think if you can see yourself and you can see a community for you, I think that is going to really, you know, do nothing but just strengthen us as individuals and as a community.
Jessica, I was taken by the poem that you had about the sacrifice of Isaac, and you brought into it the shooting in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And the life shooting, which was really fascinating that you sort of pivoted into that form of it. I mean, clearly big moment of anti-Semitism. And that sort of baby background, or that kind of reference point of the story of Isaac, inspire, sort of lead to that moment in your poem when you brought that into it, or thought about that, or brought you to it?
I mean, yes, absolutely. And it felt like something that needed to be recognized. But I think a big part of that poem for me is the hatred that can be carried out by unquestioning belief against Black people, against so many people in our country, things that we do to each other. And I think that if we can't treat everyone well, that we can't push back against anti-Semitism either. Like we really need to say, you know, racism is not okay, like anti-Semitism, we have to look at all of it. And I think that was what really inspired me with that poem was, you know, and that's why in the very last portion of the poem, I wanted to turn and look at myself and say, what are the prejudices that I carry? What are the ways that I cause harm? And not just be pointing at other people, because I think, you know, the person I can change most is myself. And then hopefully that can ripple out through the world. So, Joy, did you want to say something?
Are you going to respond to? Joy, I think Joy was about to say something.
I love everything that Jessica was just saying, and I do think that one of the privileges of being Jewish in America is, because anti-Semitism isn't structural the way it is in other countries where being Jewish, there's a parallel between structural racism and structural anti-Semitism in some countries. But in this country, it isn't there yet. And when most of my life, the hatred that I've directly experienced has been about being trans or queer, and not about being Jewish. And I've experienced, and I'm no longer in academia. I'm, mostly housebound by illness. So the honest answer, Baruch, is nothing. I will write poetry and I will be visibly Jewish. And I do think that that is important. When I was able to speak in person on colleges, for example, students often told me that it was important for them to see somebody who was, it never occurred to me to think of myself as presenting or not presenting myself as Jewish. It's like you get the total package with me. This is the only me that there is. But there are, as Jessica was saying, there are a lot of people who are burdened by a sense of shame and self-hatred or rage about their Jewishness. But in any case, there's like a compartmentalization where you have to choose whether you're going to live that part of yourself or not. So I thought there was some small benefit in that, but not so much in terms of pushing back against anti-Semitism. I always, have a fantasy that understanding is stronger than hatred. And, I think that's like the arc of the universe bending toward justice. I think possibly at the place where parallel lines meet in the ideal plane, it is possible that this is always true. But I think in the moments of rage and hatred and violence, there is just like this desire to lash out at people we see as other, whatever stuff we make up for it, whatever permission structure led us to do it. I think it's something that's, pre-rational. It's outside of language in some way. And I don't know what to do about it.
Writing poetry, maybe? Is that worth doing?
Yes, I keep writing poetry. I do not get many fan letters saying I used to be anti-Semitic, but after reading Shekhinah Speaks, that's all behind me now.
It
But
just came out. Come on.
it's true.
My question was going to be about, you kind of stole the show on my question there, Joy, because I was talking about identity and the sense of, it seems like decades ago, perhaps it feels like Jewish writers, I'm thinking about Bellow and people of that generation, didn't want to be labeled a Jewish writer. In fact, they removed themselves, it seems, because they thought it limited them. But here we have a Jewish poetry reading series, and so you're labeled as a Jewish poet. Does that identity sometimes limit you, or does it open yourself up and free you, and you're proud of that, and you're happy with that? Or do you have some moments when you feel, well, no, I'm not a Jewish poet today, How do you feel about the labeling of being a Jewish poet, that identity? And you mentioned your other identities. What about those other identities you
I
have?
just want to say I've taught some of the ambivalent writings of that generation of Jewish American writers, great writers. It was an amazing generation. But really, before Allen Ginsberg, I think many of them were burdened by the feeling that literature was not Jewish and that literary standards were not Jewish. And in a way, that's a very Jewish situation. If you think back to the poetry contests that the rabbis would have in the Golden Age in Spain with the Muslim poets, this sense that other people get to define aesthetic excellence, that has not been something that is within the Jewish tradition. And that's not a burden that I've ever felt. I don't know if that's, because of Allen Ginsberg and the Beats took sufficient drugs that they stopped worrying about it, or my own hubris. But I've never felt limited by being a Jewish poet. I've worried sometimes that explicit Jewishness limited my readers, but I've had so few readers that I like, how many readers do most poets have? How many am I losing? And so I feel like instead being Jewish just connects me with thousands of years behind me and thousands of years ahead of me in ways that none of my other identities do or could.
Maybe it was Kaddish that made a difference. Ginsberg's poem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what Joyce said. It's fascinating kind of hearing it. I don't know about labels, but I do believe in details, and I do believe in specificity. I feel like as a writer, specificity is universal. So I just kind of approach writing from that place. I'm going to bring the specificity of my perspective, whether that's Jewish, whether that's a parent, whether that's a New Yorker, whether that's, whatever that is. I'll try to bring all that in and kind of have faith that specificity is universal, and that's how you connect with a reader, with people from different countries, genders, centuries, so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm not afraid of that.
I mean, I think for me, in a lot of ways, I've been asked this question a lot more as a queer writer. Like, do I feel like I'm writing, lesbian poems, especially when I'm writing poems about my wife? And to me, I grew up reading mostly, straight white men writing about their wives or girlfriends, and that was a love poem. It wasn't a straight white male love poem, right? And so I can write a tree, and that's not like a lesbian tree poem. And in the same way, every poem I write is a queer poem. Every poem I write is a Jewish poem. And I totally agree with you, Jared, that if I can put enough of myself in there and I can ask real questions and have kavanah, like have that true intention, then I hope that in the same way that like I loved those love poems, right? And they applied to me, even though my love looked a little bit different, that I can write a Jewish poem and it's going to ask a question that anybody can access and is going to be meaningful to them if I bring my full self to bear. So yeah, I'm not afraid of
really a good model of that, in terms of Jewish literature that speaks to, billions of people who are not Jewish.
I have a friend who's a great poet. And many people love him. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to embarrass him or anything. I didn't think he was Jewish from his poetry, reading him. And finally, I read a couple of poems that I thought maybe he was. So I asked, "Are you Jewish?" I had to ask him. And he was a very well-known poet. And he said, "On my parents' side." I thought it was hilarious. But he didn't really want to be, it was poetry, just poetry. Not lesbian poetry, not Jewish poetry, not whatever poetry.
But who was it that said all poets are Jewish?
Marina Fitzteva. And I know that because I just brought out the book because I was about to quote her, Baruch.
Oh, I beat you to it.
All poets are Jews. Or was it all Jews? I say all Jews are poets.
Wasn't she saying, she's saying that though, that in that all poets are outsiders in a way?
Yes, yeah, she wasn't Jewish.
Yeah.
All poets are outsiders, and she associated with, you think about Jewish poets in Russia back in her era, when Mandelstam and Akhmatova were persecuted desperately, and Babel you know, those writers, those Russian Jewish writers. Wow.
We
Any
got
questions?
do we have time for more questions, or do we have to, because we have some audience questions?
I think
Sorry to
we're
interrupt you, Phil.
No, just about to ask the same thing. Are there any
Yeah,
audience?
I think there's two questions that I can see in the chat. So if you guys
Great.
want to go ahead and ask those, and then we can maybe wrap it up with,
Okay.
I
The
see a
first
question from
one-
Simon. Yep.
The first one is from Simon. It's for Jessica. Let's see. Jessica, did you return to did you return to a level of Frumkeit, or was it just a textual return?
Sorry to laugh. No. For me, my shul is study. That's really where I feel like that the Shekhinah for me is when I am deep within a text, but it's also when I'm in community like this, when I sit and listen to the poems of Jared and to Joy, and so many of the poets who are here with us as audience members. I would like to go to, to kind of be more observant in that way, but I don't think I've found my way into a group that feels quite right. And so to me, my communing with the sacred is through study, and then using that as a genesis for writing. So thank you for that question, Simon.
Was there another question?
We have another question from Beth Morris. Do you think there's a general difference in people's connection to their Jewishness? My parents, for example, turned away from their Jewishness post World War II.
There's a generational difference.
Yeah.
In people's connection to their Jewishness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
would say that there are so many varieties in people's relation, both in varieties of connection and varieties of disconnection, and ideas of the Jewishness that they're connecting or disconnecting from. It's one of the blessings of being an American Jew and not having the structural anti-Semitism. So you have Jewishness outside the Jew, non-Jew binary. And it turns out to be even weirder and more various than trans identities outside the gender binary. There's so many different ways of being and not being Jewish. And it's like, the old joke about on the desert island, the first thing a Jew does is build two shuls, one to go to and one that you'd never set foot in. But I feel like every American Jew has at least two Jewishnesses, and one is the one they would never set foot in.
Yeah, we're very schizophrenic.
I mean, I think, yeah, I absolutely, Joy. And a story for me that I think really speaks to that is when I started doing the study, and, I've been very, very poorly, but, trying to teach myself biblical Hebrew. And my parents called for some holiday, and, I think, they said Happy Hanukkah or whatever. And I said, oh, Hag Sameach. And as they were getting off the phone, I think they thought they'd already hung up. My mother said, boy, she's so Jewish. So this is shocking to my parents, a shocking turn, but it's fun. It's nice to be able to surprise them, I guess. So.
All right. Thank you guys so much for reading. It was awesome.
Oh, we have another reading coming next month. Stay tuned. Eve Grubin, Michael Mark, who I think is here. Hi, Michael. Can't wait to hear you read. And Grace Schulman. Wow.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fantastic. And Katie, what date is that? February?
So it's February 9th.
9th.
And just so everyone knows, you have to re-register again. I'm sorry, but I had to do them all as separate Zoom links. So I had to make it difficult on you all, but you'll have to go back to the website and re-register, and you'll get a new Zoom link. But I hope you will join us. Thank you for participating tonight. Please spread the word, share it with your friends and colleagues, and we look forward to to seeing you next month as well. And thank you again to Jessica, Jared, and Joy tonight. So really wonderful. You guys have
This
a
will be
great
on-
evening.
This
Thank
reading
you.
will be on YouTube, and you'll let us know when it's going to be coming up.
Yeah, so I'll probably just send out a follow-up email tomorrow, thanking you guys again. I'll include our readers' contact information again, and then I should have the recording link, so you can feel free to share that out as well.
Now, if this was in person, this would be the time we buy books, all the books that are on that table, and have them all signed. So that's one thing we can't do right now, but you can do it. So, I mean, wow. Let's support our poets and read them and enjoy them and love them as we did tonight. Take them with you, carry them around.
Go to
See-
their websites. Go to their
Go to their
websites and buy their
website.
books.
There's a bunch of their poems online, and their books are beautiful. Thank you so much, poets. We just really appreciate it. And thanks so much for everybody for joining us. And keep reading poetry. You know, it's an odd world out there. We need poetry more than ever.
Thank you, JCC
Thank
of
you.
Buffalo.
Thank you,
and Katie.
Philip.
Oh, Buffalo. Thank you, Katie. She's
My pleasure. And thank you,
Fantastic.
Phil and Baruch. So we'll
Yeah.
see you all again in February.
February.
Have a
What
great
else have we
night.
got to do on a cold February evening? Poetry.
Good night, everyone.